Hey everybody, my name is Austin and this is my wife Maggie, and this week we're going to be doing a short devotional on chapters 37 and 38 of Genesis, and we're going to be looking at the start of the story of Joseph as well as Judah. And so we're going to start in verse 37. I'm going to read 11 verses and you can read along, and then we're going to talk about it. So chapter 37 verse 1. Now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. This is the story of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. Also he made him a tunic of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all their brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, "Please, hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then, behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright, and indeed your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf." And his brothers said to him, "Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more for his dream and for his words. Then he dreamed still another dream, and told it to his brothers, and said, "Look, I have dreamed another dream. And this time the sun and moon and 11 stars bowed down to me." So he told this to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So obviously we see some extreme favoritism here from Jacob to Joseph between his other brothers, and his brothers' blood starts to boil here, and they begin to have a hatred for him, so much so that it says they could not speak peaceably to him. And so this is where the story kind of gets juicy, and as the story builds, we start to see, and in fact, a very incredible parallel between Joseph's story and the story of Jesus, and it becomes kind of a foreshadowing story like none other. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit at the end. But as Jacob sends Joseph down to the field to get a report for his brothers begin to plot to kill him, and Joseph has an advocate in Reuben. Now the interesting thing is Reuben is the eldest, and technically he deserved the blessing, and cut that out. Wait, where did I leave off? It was now the interesting thing is Reuben is the oldest, and technically Reuben was the one that deserved the blessing, but we see that given to Joseph. So it's really an incredible testimony of I'm losing my words here. I wrote it down. Okay. All right. Now the interesting thing about Reuben is the oldest child, and so technically this love that's being poured out on Joseph by Jacob, this blessing, this really belongs to Reuben, and so it's really incredible that Reuben is advocating for Joseph as his brothers want to kill him. Reuben's saying, "No, let's not kill him. Let's put him in this pit," and really is trying to save Joseph's life. So they put him in a pit. They see the Ishmaelites coming, and Judah has an idea and says, "Hey, let's sell Joseph into the hands of the Ishmaelites, because at least we'll profit from it." And so Joseph gets sold into slavery. Now here's where there's some real interesting callbacks to Jacob's life. Joseph's brothers find a goat and they kill it and they wipe the blood all over his tunic, and they bring this goat's blood to Jacob. And the interesting thing is that earlier we see Jacob use a goat skin to fool his father, to get the blessing. And as we come forward to this story, here his sons are kind of doing the same thing. They're using a goat's blood to fool his father into thinking Joseph has been killed. And Jacob begins to weep and to mourn, and his sons begin to comfort him. But here's the interesting thing about, as we pause this story of Joseph and go into Judah's story, here are some parallels to look out for as you read the story of Joseph that foreshadow the story of Christ. And so Joseph was a beloved son. He was sent by his father to his brothers. He was hated and rejected by his brothers. His brothers plotted to kill him. They stripped him of his robe. They sold him for 20 pieces of silver, just like Jesus was sold for 30 pieces of silver. He was imprisoned with two criminals. He was falsely accused. He suffered and then rose and was exalted to Pharaoh's right hand. He was given a new name, ended up seeing his brothers and forgiving his brother, and obviously at the end saving a lot of lives. So some very interesting parallels in the life of Joseph and Christ. But we'll flip it over to Maggie so we can go through Judah's little side quest.
So we move on to Genesis 38, where we learn more about Judah and what his story is. So we learn that Judah has a wife, and he has 3 sons through this wife. He has his oldest son, his second son, Onan, and his last son, Shelah. So Judah eventually finds a wife for his oldest son, and this woman's name is Tamar. Now it says in the Bible that was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. And when this happened, Judah goes to his youngest son Onan and says, "Since your brother is dead, go marry your brother's wife and bear children with her and give an heir to her for your oldest brother." And so Onan goes, and instead of fulfilling what he is supposed to, he scatters his seed and he does not give her any children because he knows that the heir would not be his. And so because of this, the Lord also puts him to death as well. So at this point, Judah only has his youngest son left that he could marry off to Tamar. But he's not of age yet, so he tells her, "Go back home, live in the house of your father, and when my oldest son is of age, you will marry him." So she goes, she puts on her widow's garments, and she goes to live with her father until Judah will come back and give her to his son. Except the only thing is that doesn't happen. Judah does not keep his promise to her. And so we eventually find out that Judah's wife has died, and at this point Judah is now going to go up to a town called Timnah to shear his sheep. And Tamar hears that he is going to be coming to this town, so she goes and she takes off her widow's garments and she covers her face with a veil, and she goes and waits on the way for him as he is making his journey to this town. So he sees her and he thinks that she is a harlot because her face is covered. And so he approaches her and he says, "Will you sleep with me?" And she says, "What will you give me if I do?" And he tells her, "I will give you a young goat from the flock." And she says, "Okay, well, what's the pledge for this? Basically, what's this collateral so I know that you're actually going to pay me what you owe me for this, or what I ask for?" And so he says, "Here is my signet and my cord and my staff. Take these until I bring you the young sheep that I promised you." She says, "Okay." And so they lay together, and she ends up conceiving from him. And she goes and she leaves, and so Judah says, okay, I need to bring a young sheep to her. He goes to honor what he said, the young sheep, and bring it to her. And he can't find her anywhere. And he asks some men, he says, hey, where's the harlot that was here in the corner? And they say, oh, there's no harlot here. So he then says to his people, okay, I can't find her and we need to leave or else I will be put to shame. So he leaves Timnah, and that's that. And then eventually word comes back to him, and he finds out that his daughter-in-law, Tamar, is a harlot. Now, at this point, he still doesn't know that the woman that he slept with was his daughter-in-law. He's still fooled. And so, but he finds out that Tamar was being a harlot, and not only that, she has conceived a child through this. And he is very upset, and he says, bring her to me and we're gonna burn her. Now, I do think it is interesting that he had just slept. She was still with child, so it couldn't have been too long between this interaction, but he had slept with a prostitute, but then finds out that his daughter-in-law is doing that, and he's going to put her to death for the sin that she has committed. But it doesn't really appear at this point that he has confronted his own sin of sleeping with a prostitute earlier. So anyway, they bring him to her, or her to him. They bring Tamar to Judah, and she says, and now at this point, she is a little dramatic, and she says, this signet and this cord and staff that I have, this is whose child I'm carrying right now. And she presents him with his own staff and his signet. And so he learns at this point that the prostitute that he slept with was actually his daughter-in-law, Tamar. And so he recognizes, he even says, she is more righteous than I. So he spares her and he does not burn her because he failed to keep his promise. She wouldn't have resorted to that if he had fulfilled his duties of providing her the brother of her first husband so that she could have heirs and that she wouldn't grow up to be destitute and die alone on the streets, because that's what happened if you didn't have children in these days. So he spares her, and she ends up giving birth to 2 boys, Perez and Zerah, if I'm saying that right. And we later see in the Bible that Perez is actually a direct ancestor of Jesus. And so what we can kind of learn from this is that even throughout all of our sinfulness and wickedness and all of the, evil things that humanity does, God is still able to use our actions to fulfill his promises, because his promise was that the Messiah would come from the lineage of Jacob. And so this is, of course, not the ideal situation, and it's a sinful, sad thing that happened, but he was still able to fulfill his promise. And we later see that the Messiah, Jesus Christ, is born from the lineage of this illegitimate child that Tamar had with Judah.